Testing. What's up? I'm Jacob Litzo, your Elixir Mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor Podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. Today, we have a very special guest returning to the show. I'm thrilled to welcome back Michael Lubas, CEO of Paraxial.io. Michael holds a special place in the history of this podcast as he was my very first guest. I don't even know, like a year ago now, February. So Michael, welcome back. It's awesome to have you back on.
Thank you.
And
thank you. It's awesome.
I know we have a last minute shift. We lost Michael through in the last minute. Unfortunately, he had another thing come up, but we're still going to be covering the same topics, and I think it'll be a really good conversation.
Yeah, thanks. We got connected because of that Gigalixir article, and then you've also been using Paraxial in your work.
Yes, I have been, and I love it. Easy integration, and my platform doesn't get a lot of traffic yet, so it's depressing to see how many bots are just crawling my site and getting blocked.
Well, that's good that they're getting blocked.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like Paraxial has had a ton of updates since you've been on last. Do you want to talk about some of your major features and releases?
Yeah, of course. The one that got the most attention was really the free tier, which basically means if you're a developer using Elixir, or any programming language, really, we can talk about that later. But this is the Elixir podcast. If you have an Elixir app and it's not commercial, so you're not making any money off of it, you can use Paraxial for free, which is very nice because you can learn about security and all these topics. I know people, particularly in Elixir, they tend to be a little wary of free tiers because there's this history of venture-backed companies. They start with the free tier, and then there's this push for growth, and then the free tier goes away or something. So I wanted to talk about kind of how is it economically viable when Paraxial is a bootstrap business? How can you kind of give away the free tier? So I should mention that the big difference is with the ingestion of traffic. So that's where a lot of the cost to operate a service like Paraxial comes, is when you ingest traffic, there's a processing cost for every gigabyte of data or so. With the free tier, you actually get the bot defense features because you can run them without doing the traffic ingestion. So the per user cost of running I have it all kind of calculated out in a lot of detail. It's very cheap from the server side. It's also great because, from an economic perspective, if you're a developer using this on your personal project and you're saying, wow, this is a security tool that's actually good, but, a developer sat down and designed this and it seems like they actually have a brain. It's not some enterprise junk. What's the word you would use for most security software? I don't know. Have you used enterprise security software before?
No, I have done a great job of avoiding most corporate life in my developer and software world. So
as you can imagine, there's a lot of money and budgets for this kind of things. And the big problem is all of that goes to the decision maker, who is often not the programmer. So that's why a lot of this software is just so horrible. So the Paraxial model is, if somebody uses the software and is a developer and says, wow, this is actually pretty good, I'm using this for my side project or whatever, that person will probably also have a job at some point and be involved in a decision-making process. And I think that's so much more valuable than trying to market to the Fortune 500 companies. They have the chief information security officer. So that's the person at that company that does the decision making of what security software they're going to buy. And these people are the most emailed, LinkedIn, people offering them AirPods and trips to Van, anything, they're absolutely sick of it. and it's just insane kind of what goes on. So, how many people are in that decision-making capacity at the Fortune 500? It's probably about 500 people. How many software developers do you think are out there?
I'm sure they're like with the security world too. It's just full of buzzwords, right? And they're selling a product to people that don't know that much about security.
Yeah, and what I like about engaging with the Elixir community, going on podcasts like this, is you can't really fool developers. Like if something sucks, they're not going to use it.
Yeah.
You can get away with it in enterprise corporate longer than you'd expect. But yeah, it's like, okay, most developers are using this tool. I know we've seen some hype cycles with the low interest rates and things and that, but for something that you just find personally useful in your day to day, I think there's a tremendous amount of value in that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Well, like I know like the very first time I had you on, and then I made a tutorial video for Paraxial as well, and I knew very little. Like I know the dangerous things that
Yeah, we should explain this for the guests. Like, what is Paraxial?
Yeah.
Because we're assuming that.
Yeah, so I'll let you do that because I would butcher it. So
Well, the one sentence summary is, you have an Elixir application. It's going on the public internet. It's going to get attacked by bots and people are going to try to hack it, no matter what size you are. And Paraxial helps you ensure that the app you put online is secure. I want to hear your description of it too, because you're a user now.
Yeah, actually, I got a kick out of it. So timing kind of worked out. I just finished building like a web hosting platform in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And then I got my first client where we just launched his website, but I already had Paraxial integrated. And what's wild is actually I might have got it integrated a day later because I was sitting there watching my logs. And within 4 hours of just opening up an IP address to the big wide world of the internet, I was getting just hits after hit from like bot crawls, just trying to crawl random paths and URLs. And it was wild. So 4 hours of a new product being online. And I'm sure it happens faster depending on popularity of an IP address or where it's hosted. But yeah. And then so getting Paraxial integrated, it was awesome because then I just started seeing all these WordPress paths get blocked.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, WordPress is so heavily hit. Like I would say that's most of the bad traffic on my platform.
That doesn't surprise me at all. There was a survey ranking how secure web frameworks are, which is something I'm interested in. So you're making a website with Rails or Phoenix or WordPress. WordPress was the least secure. So it had the most security problems. And then
I'm guessing they have a lot of default admin portals and things that get crawled and discovered, right?
Yeah, it's a combination of, WordPress is very popular and it's very extensible. There's plugins and things. You can use it even if you're not a developer, but that does lead to problems. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned going online because I talk to people and they think, oh, I'm a small company. I'm one person. How would a bad guy even find my site? And the answer is when you register a domain name for like a TLS certificate, people monitor that and then immediately will scan those sites and try to find them for a number of reasons. But a big one is if you want to do credit card fraud, you have 1 million credit cards that you want to test which ones would work. They're stolen, by the way. You're a criminal in this scenario. Not good. You want to test those against a site. All of the major e-commerce sites know about this and block it. But who usually doesn't is new sites that just came online. And it's a guy with a Phoenix app and a Stripe set up. Those get targeted all the time. And that's where I've seen a lot of people get benefit out of Paraxials against those carding attacks. It's very, very common.
Yeah. I think it's like a bit terrifying too if you're naive to this.
Yeah, well, it's difficult too because I have my own soapbox about this. You get a lot of like security vendors saying like, oh, developers don't care about security, which is wrong. I think that is a wrong statement. Developers care a lot about securities. In my experience, security vendors don't care about developers. They care about, sales and the chief information security officer and the buzzwords and putting AI in their product, even if it doesn't make any sense. I talk to developers all day.
Or creating an NFT, or is that done now?
I don't know. But that's the thing. It's like I go on podcasts like this and it's like, oh, the security episode, like people are going to be interested in this. Like people are interested in it. The content that's out there though is just not written for developers. There's just very little good material out there. The tooling is not very good. So that's something I want to do a lot with Paraxials, kind of get that into people's hands.
Yeah, and I think that's good. Like one thing, like obviously developers care, but like I think as time goes on to more and more developers, it's easier to operate a small team and become a product owner.
Oh yeah.
So it's easier. So you have a lot more developers becoming product owners. And I think they're aware of the vulnerabilities they have, but I think it becomes I'll worry about it when I have to or when I can afford it. So they're they leave things out there in the open, vulnerable, hoping they're not popular enough to be targeted.
Yeah, and that's the problem is the targeting is automated.
Right.
It's not some guy sitting down and like, oh, I found this stuff. It's usually just a scanner that picks it up.
Right. And if you are targeted from a non-automated thing, most likely they'll probably find a vulnerability if you're like the target, right?
Yeah. There's a whole dimension to it.
Yeah, I remember this. I feel like this was a different lifetime ago, but I was very involved in like the crypto world and like blockchain, Zem, that kind of stuff. And the company I was working for, the CEO actually got personally targeted because he just did a coin launch, right? And some dude knew a guy that he paid at like, I don't know, T-Mobile. To duplicate, the SIM card. And cellular companies, they don't know that there's a duplicate on their network for like a couple hours. So they start intercepting all of your two-step auth codes if you have them go to your phone number versus using like an authenticator app.
Yes.
And so he got his email hacked, everything hacked, and some of the coins he was launching ended up getting hacked because they found like a private key in one of his accounts.
Yeah. And that's a problem with SMS 2FA, but that's very, very...
Yeah, I always tell people not to use SMS. Yeah. Like you should be using an authenticator app.
It's just going to get worse. People live their lives online now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess like to circle back, because we were talking about just small web projects, like why does security matter to me? Like say I deploy on some past system like Gigalixir. Why does it matter to me if I don't even have any like data that I could worry about losing or, something like that?
Yeah, this is a great question because like, why would you care? It's just like a project out there. I would say the good news is if you don't have any data, that's kind of a good thing because you're not, going to be causing a data breach. But if let's say the server that you're hosting does get hacked, there are a few things that the bad guy could do. Number one is just mine cryptocurrency on it, which is going to get transferred to your bill. You could negotiate with Michael. He's a nice guy. I'm sure he wouldn't keep you on the hook but then he might have to be on the hook for that with his business. It like creates this terrible incentive where it just ruins like, anything where you have a little bit of hosting, people will target it and try to just mine cryptocurrency on it. So
I'm sure that's one of the biggest problems like Gigalixir and other past companies have to worry about too.
With a free tier, especially. But let's say, even let's say they're not going to do that. It could even be more sinister. Let's say they're going to go onto that box and then send spam email from it, or they're going to do more attacks from it. And then suddenly, your
IP is now flagged.
Your web project is now involved in some kind of nation state hacking campaign, and you've got the FBI. I mean, I don't mean to scare people. The likelihood of that happening is pretty low, but it could happen if a server that you own is now tied to this hacking campaign because somebody compromised it. It's just not a situation you really want to be in if it's avoidable.
Yeah, that would suck. I mean, you're just sitting here at your desk in your underwear and you get the FBI knocking on your door.
I don't think that would, they usually communicate with people, or like there's cybercrime investigations,
Yeah.
but yeah, you don't want to have a bad guy on your servers,
Well,
using
you
it
just
as,
don't want to foot the bill for someone else. That's the main thing, especially if you're a bootstrap company. Like, you know how difficult it is to bootstrap a company until you become profitable.
oh yeah, yeah. And it never ends too, because then when you're profitable, you're probably more liable to lawsuits because you have
Yeah.
deeper pockets to pay out. So yeah, um, cybersecurity, it's relevant at every level. You kind of can't, I'd say it's table stakes now for any big,
Yeah.
because people ask me this about Praxia, like what's your total addressable market that this company could serve? I'd be like, well, does a business have a web application where people log in? Okay, that's part of the market, and that's most businesses today, no matter what
Yeah.
you're in. It could be construction, could be media, could be real estate, medical, banking, anything.
Yeah. What like, so Paraxel has its free tier.
Yes.
I have a small project. How does the free tier protect me? What are like the limitations of it?
The limitations are, I think it's about 30 scans a month, which is a good amount.
Can you explain what a scan is?
Yeah, so a scan, it means your source code.
Okay.
So it's checking for vulnerable dependencies, which is, you have like a deps, like a hex package that has a vulnerability or a security problem. It's also checking the source code. So if you write some code that's not secure, it would catch that. What else do we have? So that's the code scan. There's also the app audit, which is the inventory. So let's say like tomorrow, there's some really bad Phoenix problem. And this can happen in anything. Rails has had this happen a few times, where it's, if you're running this version of Phoenix, you're vulnerable, and anyone who can run curl against your app could hack into it if this version is running. Very common. With Praxial, you could actually see, okay, I checked this in production at runtime. It's this version. I'm safe.
Mm-hmm.
Like every security person ever at a company has had to do that at one point or another after some big security thing was leaked. Like Log4j was a recent example. We weren't using Java at the company I was working at the time, so we were sitting there going, yeah, we're good. Every other place was on fire.
The app audit is my second favorite, next to seeing, the blocked requests.
Yeah.
But like, it's so nice because it just gives you an inventory of even dependencies you don't realize were in your project, because
that's always fun. I like
because they're dependencies from other dependencies, which is always like, a huge security vulnerability, but it gives you a good like overlook to even see if you want to be using all the dependencies that are in your project, because you might not want one of the dependencies that they're using. And so I love that feature, just having the quick overview of all your libraries.
That's a good one. So app audit, the code scans. Code scans hooks into the GitHub app as well. So you can check every new pull request for security problems.
Yeah, the GitHub action is super nice. I love that.
Yeah, people went crazy for that when it launched.
Yeah, I bet. Now, is that included in the free tier?
Yeah, that's in the free tier. The GitHub app, code scans, app, like really all the app secure features,
Awesome.
exploit guard, the runtime. That's the one that checks at runtime if somebody's trying to hack you.
Okay.
Because the cost to run it on the Praxio backend is actually very low. Just, obviously the scan limit, you can't do 1,000 scans a month. Yeah. As a free tier member. But yeah, I think it definitely gets people, thinking about security in the right way, thinking about the security of their code. And then for bot defense, which you've been using, you can't see the traffic on the free tier because that's the paid feature. But you can do the IP blocking, you can do the rate limiting, the banning requests from rented servers, which is how people cycle through IPs. Yeah, I'm very happy with the free tier. People seem to like it.
I had to get a little creative because I built a web hosting platform, right?
Yeah.
And I'm doing a lot of the routing. I mean, I have Nginx and like certbot, at the Docker container level.
That's good.
And then when I come in, though, I'm looking at the host, and then I'm using plug to route to the specific website.
Yeah.
And so I have a dynamic live view essentially. So I have a parent live view that then loads a child live view inside of it. And so I had to get a little creative because a lot of paths will just return like a 404, but on my end, it returns a 200. I have some things to like iron out, but like if too many of my 404 live views get hit, I've been using the rate limiter to block those IP addresses.
That's good.
Yeah, so it's been working pretty well, and I like that a lot because I like that you automatically pretty much block requests from any like data centers because
Should we explain about that, why that's bad?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you do IP rate limiting, which I absolutely recommend, it seems really basic. This one IP address just did 100 login attempts. You should ban it. You'd be shocked how many companies don't have that set up. If you do, like, great. You absolutely want that. Even if you have some really expensive AI, whatever solution, I've been at companies where those got bypassed. And then the day after the attack, you're sitting there going, why didn't we have rate limiting in place? So you want rate limiting. The way
especially if anything's exposed, like if you have a public API or anything, you want rate limiting.
Exactly. So the thing the bad guys do is they will take the attack that they're doing and they'll see they get banned from one IP and they will proxy their traffic through a cloud provider. And I'll give AWS as the example here, where they have a service called API Gateway. So you can do this from your laptop. There's like scripts on GitHub that you don't have to know how to code. You just know how to run the script. It will run the credential stuffing attack, the login attempts with the usernames and password. But now every request has a different IP. So every single HTTP request, you send 1,000 requests, 1,000 different IPs. The common denominator is they all come from Amazon. So if you see 1,000 requests from Amazon, or really, if you see a login attempt from an Amazon data center IP, you don't want to serve that. So Praxial can block that for you, even on the free tier. That's a free tier feature.
That's really nice. And I never thought about that until you explained it to me, because I think I had a question about something with rate limiting and IP traffic. And
the story of how that got started, I was working at a bank, financial startup, where I saw this attack and we were paying a lot of money for a very expensive, like a modern WAF firewall solution. And I was sitting there thinking, I could code this myself. Why are we sitting here like relying on our vendor? This seems pretty simple. And I had the same experience at my next job, and that's how Praxial got started. Turns out coding is the easy part. Running a business is a lot more complicated than a software project. Although software is hard. People will say, "Oh, software is the easy part. The business is hard." No, software is also hard.
I will say that. I say that all the time.
Building the product.
Building the product is easy, at least for me, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but selling your product, that's hard.
But also learning the code is hard.
Well, that's true. Difficult. No, I agree. It is. And
it's not easy.
I just saw this great, Theo just did something like a couple days ago where he went through some blog post, Y Combinator, something where he was talking about hiring, and he's like, most people make the mistake of hiring for things they hate to do or that they don't know how to do, when you should really only be hiring for things that you love to do and you know how to do. And that hit home because I keep trying to find people to help me with sales because I hate doing sales. So it's kind of like, okay, you love building your product. It's time to hire a developer so you can focus on sales until you're good at it. And then when you're good at sales, then you hire someone to do sales. And I thought that was a pretty awesome advice.
Yeah, it's complicated too, because I think people have different pictures of sales. I think a lot of software people just write off sales completely. They just are like, no, my product's so good, it'll sell itself.
Unfortunately, that is not true.
I don't need I don't need any salespeople.
Yeah.
I mean, it does depend on your market, of course, and kind of what your goals are. But yeah, I I think whatever you're doing in software or building a company, it's all challenging. I wouldn't say any of it is easy.
No, yeah, not at all. And like everyone comes from different backgrounds too. So you could have a sales background and start building your own software product. Then building your software is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done.
You know what's interesting too? I've noticed this in a few areas of life, but I think sometimes when you study a subject kind of academically with, a textbook, something where there's a textbook for it, you kind of think about it in a different way compared to somebody who just has zero background knowledge at all and just, I'm going to do this, like whatever project it is, I'm going to kind of run at it. And I know that doesn't apply for everything, maybe when you go to a dentist or something, you'd like them to have some textbook knowledge on dentistry, of course.
You don't want them just guessing and drilling.
Yeah, just guessing around. But I think even in a lot of fields, just kind of trying to go for things with a different perspective, where you're saying like, okay, I know this is like the traditional wisdom. I'm just going to try this completely different. I'm going to kind of run at the solution. You'll probably run into the same problems that other people ran into from that perspective. I also think that just trying something, like the action of it is really important. I know this is starting to sound like a startup podcast, not an Elixir podcast.
I mean, it's kind of both. Like, I think like learning Elixir and like Phoenix are the best tools to bootstrap and build your own product with, because you don't need a big team. I feel like you can build quickly.
Yeah, I suppose that's a good segue, because the big announcement I have coming up very soon, well, it's live now. Praxial is coming into Rails support very soon. So that's up on the website now, which is kind of like it's a natural next step. Thank you. Yeah, because so many Elixir people also know Ruby and Rails. And I think philosophically, the two communities share a lot in terms of people usually learn those languages and frameworks not because they want to get a job at a big tech company. I'll call it like, Kubernetes as an example. I don't think many people are kind of learning Kubernetes for their own use necessarily. Like with Ruby and Elixir and Phoenix, it was very much like, I want to build something. And Rails, like huge influence on Phoenix, I think. Oh, hello. You've got
Do you see my dog back there?
In your background.
Yeah. Jax likes to make an appearance on my live streams from time to time.
Awesome.
I guess. All right. So you're releasing, is everything going to be feature matched for Ruby, or how is that working for you?
Yeah, that's what I'm very excited about. Is it's going to be completely feature matched, like on launch day. There's this chart on the Praxial site. I think that was like the best marketing I ever did. It only took 2 years of the company and building features, where it's just saying these are all the features that Praxial does compared to kind of other security vendors.
I want to pull that up. I feel like
can you pull stuff up on this?
Yeah, let me, maybe. I might lose you for a second though if I do.
You need like a Jamie from the Jamie
podcast. Well, what's annoying is I always forget to set things up. So like I have so I use Stream Deck and I have like 2 different themes. I have my interview one and then my code along one.
Yeah.
So I don't have like the screen sharing on this one. And I need to set that up because
that's okay.
Oh, well, but I love that. Guys, go to Paraxial.io and the fully Ruby and Elixir support. It's awesome because all your competitors are sitting there with like 1 or 2 check marks. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8.
Well, and this is the thing that I saw as a developer or security engineer was you kind of sit down and you say, okay, these are like the most realistic threats to my project. Like I'm going to get attacked by bots. People are going to try to hack it. I need this information about the dependencies. No product does all of that, really, because I can tell you exactly why. When you start a cybersecurity company in application security, you go out and raise a lot of VC money and you're saying, we're going to be the best at dependencies or static analysis or anything, whatever. And you usually are. Those companies do very well. They raise the money. They go after the Fortune 500 CISOs. They get their sales pipeline kind of figured out. And they're good for a while. And then kind of like the creep comes in where, the big companies, they want more features that only really a big company would ever want. And the product's just, it's not designed for a developer. It's designed for a big company that wants this one specific feature. There's really nothing out there before Praxial.io where you kind of sat down and said, okay, I'm just like a developer. I'm not a security expert, but I want to secure my app. How do I do that? And I'm shocked and I'm not surprised that this has happened, because I think every security company falls into this trap where you raise VC money. Okay, where are your milestones? Like, where are the enterprise deals? That's what all your investors want to see. They don't care how many developers you onboarded. They care how many enterprise contracts you landed.
Well, that's where the money is, right?
But I would say and this is like my insane idea here, is that all of those companies end up kind of being one and the same. Like, you're a software developer. Apart from Praxial, like, is there kind of a standard? Like, I have a Rails app or an Elixir app. Like, I need to secure it. Like, what do I use?
No, I mean, I was just out there being naive, hoping I wouldn't get hacked for most of it.
All the major software is kind of like, it's like big corporate companies. And when you go to a developer security conference, you'll very, very rarely see a security firm there. But my whole thing is, the security firm that developers really like is going to be the one that wins in a much bigger and meaningful way. It's a much better opportunity because it's going to stick around. There's more developers than CISOs. And there's
what I like about your approach is you reach out, you're easy to deploy, you have good documentation for developers. So now when big companies that have, their tech stack is Elixir and they're not using anything, or they're using a different expensive corporate solution, people are going to start talking about Praxial at like the low developer level.
Yeah. So much more of a bottom-up approach. Exactly. And you've seen this approach with other businesses. I think Stripe is a great example where, did you code web apps before Stripe was around?
Dude, I kind of just started as Stripe was becoming popular, like, because their documentation was so amazing. So I want to feel like I started using Stripe like really early in my career, because it was just like the same timing as like when I was doing web applications and like backends and like the Node.js world. Stripe was just popping up really cool. And before that, it was like PayPal and like other like kind of crappy solutions that were harder to integrate, because they didn't really catch up until Stripe made them.
Yeah, that was the thing, because all the payment processors were going, oh, software developers, that's cool. They don't have any money. Like, why would we target them? Stripe really saw, and now it's obvious, like, of course you go after software developers, because how do companies collect payments online? It's through software.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the time, I think it was seen as a little crazy. Like, people it's not obvious at the time.
Yeah. And it's to this day, those are like some of the most enjoyable documentation to go through is Stripe documentation.
Oh yeah, I use Stripe. It's a great company.
Yeah.
Highly recommend Stripe.
We have a question that I
please.
just don't want to forget about, because it was a little bit ago, but I'm going to butcher your name and I'm sorry. I'm not even going to try. But anyways, he's asking if Praxial, does it protect against like Ecto and SQL injection?
Oh yeah. That's a great question. So it does through the stack analysis portion. The good news is, people ask me this about Ecto. Ecto is great. If you're using Ecto by default, you're probably not vulnerable.
You should be using Ecto, honestly, not writing your own SQL queries.
If you are writing raw SQL through the Ecto adapter, Praxial will catch that. If you have somehow managed to write an Elixir app not using Ecto but using SQL, I kind of applaud that, because I don't even really know how you get started there, but probably not the best from a security perspective. Praxial also has really good docs on how to like analyze a SQL injection finding, because Soblo does occasionally throw false positives for this. It's this article that, let me double check. I can pull it up on my, I'm sorry, I can't like share my screen, but it's like,
no, it's my fault. Well, actually you can share your screen. You can, because you're on video.
I'm not even going to try because it's,
okay.
But yeah, it's called Detecting SQL Injection in Phoenix with Soblo. It's a 2022 article that I wrote, but it like walks through how like SQL injection works in Ecto. I use that article for the guidance in Praxial in like the GitHub app for how you analyze that. So yeah, SQL injection, great call out too, because my whole thing is if you have a web app, there's kind of two of like the OWASP top 10, which is actually not the top 10 in my opinion. The two big ones are like remote code execution and SQL injection. Like those are probably the most important ones you just need to check for. And it's really good that you do. And Praxial just makes it a bit more convenient.
Yeah. Praxial did a great job. I did some naughty things because I was building some dynamic views, and it called out some possible dynamic values that could have been vulnerabilities.
Was it raw with like
it was raw, yeah.
Yeah, that I see that. I didn't even think that was a thing, but I see it all the time.
Yeah. Well, the problem is I have to like I could be doing it wrong, but whenever you're doing like markdown and things where you're showing like code snippets, that's where I get the flag. But then, Praxial tells me to write like, a nice separate component to just make it a safer compartmentalized thing.
I'm glad that's a good use case.
Yeah. So there it is.
Nice.
I don't use, what is the main one that you always talk about? Binary, string to binary.
Yeah, binary to term. That's an awful.
Yeah.
That's a very, very dangerous one.
Don't do that. Don't use it.
But yeah, that's great. Do we have more questions from the audience?
Let's see. No, not product related. A lot of hellos. Nice. What's up, Adolfo? Rashab, Eddie. Good to see you guys. Let's see. I have a whole list of things. Well, okay, so I wanted to circle back where, like, when you're deploying on like Gigalixir or other past systems, what does it all take to integrate Praxial? What steps are you taking? How much work is it? And how do you know if it's even done correctly?
Yeah, so this is a big thing with a lot of security software, is it will sometimes assume that you have control over like the underlying web server. So this is something I wanted to avoid with Praxial. So it's completely installed in the Elixir code layer, meaning you have your project open, you install Praxial by adding the dependency, you can set up the plugs for bot defense and things, and then you just do, git push Gigalixir or Heroku or Fly or whatever your platform as a service is, and you're protected. You don't have to drop down into the Nginx or the Docker file or the Kubernetes, whatever. If your Elixir code runs on it, Praxial's compatible with it. Seems very obvious, right? This is something I have personally seen in the security industry, is they don't want to write a code native integration, meaning the Praxial agent for the Elixir apps is written in Elixir. Obviously, not obvious. I've seen several vendors write that in Java, and then their documentation's like, okay, you want to secure your Python app? Step 1, install Java. And you're just like, oh, great. That just like sets the tone for the entire project.
For real. Is it normally like, so I don't know much about like, let's say some of your main competitors, are they usually like a separate kind of like reverse proxy layer, or is it always software based?
So it depends. There's kind of, I would say, two different approaches here. I guess we should talk about like the CDNs are the big ones. So Cloudflare, Akamai, Fastly, those are the big CDN companies. And they're kind of incidentally security companies. I would say that security is not the focus of Cloudflare as a business. It's It's a few things. I mean, I actually like Cloudflare. I think they do a pretty good job on some things. Anti-DDoS, like CDN. So they operate, kind of the points of presence all over the world. So when you go to like retrieve an image or something, you hit a Cloudflare server that's close to you instead of going like round trip. And then, the business people or the company said, oh, we have all these servers around. We could also do DDoS protection, where you hit the Cloudflare server first, and then that absorbs the DDoS, and then it doesn't get to your server. The big problem that people run into with all of these services is it's basically a man-in-the-middle attack in a way, where when you have, the customer, like your user, and then the CDN server, and then your real server, that middle CDN server can see all of the traffic. And we know this because a few years back, it was Cloud Bleed was like the name they came up for it, where if you were a Cloudflare customer, your passwords, all the private data, from the TLS connection was just being dumped on the internet. It was like a big incident. A researcher from Google uncovered it. So people got very concerned about that risk. Having the CDN layer is really useful for all of these reasons, but then it also introduces this security risk where now all of the encrypted data is flowing through the third-party provider. So trade, and I talked to very intelligent, very sharp founders, CTOs of companies, and they didn't know about this. They said, like, what? And I was like, yeah, I mean, everyone in security knew about this because it's like the same group of people. The guy who founded is pretty famous. It was like the security, like the InfoSec news for like a.
That's why, like very early on,
yeah,
one of my first encounters with security issues was a man-in-the-middle attack.
Oh, really?
And then so I feel like I became very like aware. Yeah, it was just like I was like a little naive and just like giving too much data, in an API response or and then like manipulating too much on the back end with their requests.
Yeah.
And they used I'm trying to think what is the damn server app you can run, like Charles Proxy, is that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so they were running Charles Proxy on one of my applications and just like on the fly changing their requests. Yeah. And I was like unloading all this like paid product to these people that weren't on the paid tier. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny. The reason I kind of like cybersecurity, I think it's something very inherent in just humanity, is there are these adversarial things where when you put something online, someone's going to attack it. Like you take the security of your house or the security of your life for granted. But the world can be a pretty dangerous place in a lot of instances, and it kind of makes sense that the digital world wouldn't be any different. There's people that want to steal from you. There's also like the social media aspect of it too, but then there's also sort of like the technical aspect, which I always found so fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so ever since then I was like, dang, dude, like you can't just give them all this information in your responses. And I was like so naive. I just started like being like a back-end engineer. Like it was a very like small startup, and I was just the only one willing to step up and do something I didn't know what to do. But
yeah, I'm curious about that. So you've had a career as a developer. What do you think of like how developers approach security? Has that changed? Do you think it's gotten better, or do you feel like there's not really a standard or like a good solution yet?
I don't know. I think a lot of people, their go-to now is Cloudflare. You always hear about it.
Yeah, definitely for bot defense.
Like
anti-DDoS, I suppose.
And then I think people are smarter with payment processing. You're more likely to use services like Stripe and things and not even worry about holding data like that. I don't know if it is how long I've written software that I'm more aware of it, or
how many years experience?
I'm coming on like 10 now.
Yeah, so you're quite experienced compared to.
Yeah. So
probably
I think
the average.
it might be the experience where I'm more like aware of it, because when I first started like junior level, you kind of just assume, other people are worried about that stuff for you. And like your droplets or servers are set up to be secure, and you don't really realize like just accessing a server isn't really your only vulnerability. And
Yeah. And it changes so quickly. I get
mhm,
frustrated because, like I know this stuff just from, the work I've done, but I'll pick up a textbook or I'll try to be like, okay, imagine if I'm a developer and I'm trying to learn about this for the first time. And, the material will be outdated, or it'll be like, how do you defend against this? And it doesn't, I'm like, that's not really the way you should do it. There's definitely like a bit of a lag, like in the edge. And you see this in other fields. I think this is a problem in medicine too. Like medical textbooks aren't always, how could they be up to date with the most recent research?
right. Well, anytime like anything's published, it's already
Yeah.
out of date, right?
And then
Same
look at
with
AI
like most
now.
tech.
Yeah.
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 It's
It's
just
wild.
rapidly advancing.
Yeah. We do have another question. Eddie is asking, can Paraxial be used right from the start of a project, or can you only reach for it once a project is completed?
Oh, Eddie, fantastic question. You should start using it immediately, even if it's just, the free tier, because you don't want to start using it right before launch and then you have 100 security problems that the first scan picks up. You can start using it immediately. And then as soon as you introduce a security problem, it'll give you a heads up and you can fix it, rather than kind of coding yourself into this corner where now that vulnerable function is load bearing, which is not pleasant in a project.
Yeah, I want to say when I first got Paraxial up and running, I had to fix like 20 things. So if you put it on right away, you'll get your scans every time, you do a PR to your staging or development branch, and you can catch it right away, especially with your GitHub action.
Yeah, and that's a common question too, where people or project managers will try to put security in at the end of a project, where they say, "Oh, we're gonna spend 4 weeks developing this. Oh, and then the last 2 days we're gonna do the security." It's not how it works.
Yeah.
You have to do it continuously.
Well, I think it's really nice that you pretty much have full feature on your free tier, so that's really beneficial.
Yeah, I'm very grateful that it worked out economically and that people are using it. It's very nice to get it into the hands of developers.
Let's say like I have a project, right? And it's kind of like a pet project, but it starts to take off. What cuts me out of the free tier? When does that change?
When you charge money for it, so it wouldn't be a commercial project anymore.
Okay.
That's where the licensing changes. Yeah. So it could be a side project. If it just doesn't generate any revenue, you're fine. It's sort of the early internet had this licensing where it was like free for educational. I think a lot of software, open source software, has been in that vein. So that's where I wanted to be. Like, if you're a student, like, yeah, you're not going to buy an enterprise software license. Yeah, I've been a student before. You don't have any money. So that's unreasonable. But yeah, like, use it. Learn about security. It's beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that you did that, because it allows people to become familiar with your product as well and learn a little bit about security as they go.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, just like your little logs and your warning messages, like, you learn quite a bit just reading about like why you shouldn't use .raw.
That's a good one.
In
Yeah.
your Heeks template. Yeah.
Do
you want to explain that one at all? Do you want to explain that for people?
So there's an attack called cross-site scripting, where the summary is you go to your bank's website. The JavaScript that's running on that page should only be written or approved by your bank. A bad guy should not be running a script on that page. But let's say that for some reason your bank had like a chat feature where I could chat with Jacob on our bank accounts. I don't know why, but let's just say that you can kind of picture how that would be implemented. I'm sending some data that's going to be rendered in your browser now, right? What's the problem there? Let's say that the developer wanted to do like, I want to send a bold or like italic message. And it's like, oh, HTML, is that built in? So I'm going to just raw the data that I send to your chat so I can like bold, kind of like early MySpace days. MySpace had this problem, by the way. So that's a good example.
Dang it, Tom.
Yeah, the problem is now I could send you bold text, but I could also send a message that's like script and then some JavaScript that I wrote, and it's going to run in your bank account browsing session, which is really bad because then I can just steal your cookie. I can do a lot of bad things. I could steal your bank balance. I could issue a wire transfer. Huge security problem. So that's what cross-site scripting is.
So it essentially gives a bad guy access to your client session of that
Exactly.
app. Yeah.
Exactly. And Phoenix defends against this by default. If you code that bank app that I just described with the chat feature with Phoenix and LiveView, you won't have a problem if you just kind of stick to the default, because Phoenix renders that output correctly by default. The Phoenix people are very, very smart, and it provides you with great guardrails. The problem is, though, the raw function gets you off that, and then you're rendering the raw HTML. That's how the vulnerability gets introduced, and it's very bad for everyone, really, except the bad guy. But it's also not good to be doing bank fraud. I think that's a bad career choice.
Yeah, I mean, if you're smart enough to do bank fraud,
that's
smart enough to get a good job.
That's the sad thing. Yeah, sometimes you see these scams or these cyber crimes. It's like these people are clearly intelligent, but yeah, it's not good. You can't do it.
You could have gone the dark path, and you went the good path.
I don't know.
You're preventing the attacks versus.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting problem. There's this glorification of the black hat hackers. I think it's I hacked into a company or something. It's actually not that hard to do if you look at it just from a skill perspective. I think if you just kind of trained anyone that knew a little bit of programming, you could perform hacks. It's not really that impressive in my opinion.
Well, you're just basically going after already known vulnerabilities too.
That's the thing. I mean, you can also do the 0-day stuff, but that's actually a bit more above ground now these days. Most people that do that have a W-2 or maybe not a W-2 job, but a job where they pay taxes. It's a lot of cyber crimes, a lot of fraud, honestly.
0-day is when they find the first to find a vulnerability. Is that what that is?
Yeah. Let me explain. Yeah, because this is people kind of like this topic. Somebody that's doing credit card fraud, they're probably not that smart, to be honest. You don't have to be a genius programmer. You just have now you can buy credit card fraud kit on the dark web for $100, and it's probably some crime where it's been repackaged and forked and repackaged, and the only person making any money with it is the guy selling it. But they're we're going to teach you how to do credit card fraud. Yeah, it's stupid stuff like that.
Be a credit card fraud hacker.
At the other end of it is people who hack iPhones. And some of that's done kind of with the goal of reporting the vulnerability to Apple. Some of it's done with using the vulnerability for an intelligence agency. So a much different career path. That person is employed and usually has a job and a family. They work for their country, or they work for a major tech company or Apple or something. Just a very different social scene. I guess I'll put it that way, from the credit card fraud and the 0-day people. Very different skill sets as well.
So not much saying they're wearing a button down versus a black hoodie?
No, they still wear t-shirts, I think. That's the style. I don't see too many t-shirts. What were Black Hat and DEF CON, I think, are the two biggest ones for sure. You'll see.
Do you make an appearance at conferences?
So that's the thing. This is my whole thing with Praxia. I went to Black Hat and DEF CON a lot before I actually started the company. And I thought about this when I was sitting down, okay, I'm going to start a company to secure software. You go to Black Hat and DEF CON, and there's a million security vendors, and everyone's going to tell you their pitch, and you kind of get lost in the crowd. It's oh, great, another security vendor, that's cool. There's a million of them. But you go to a developer conference, and there's no security vendors. So then if you show up to one and you're the security guy, that's kind of you stand out. That's a good thing. So that was how I approached the marketing. We go to ElixirConf, we're going to Railworld in Toronto, September 26th, Praxia sponsoring that. I think it's a much better way to market, because you get a lot more value, and the people are excited to talk to you, like, oh, like the security guy, because you go to Black Hat and people are just like, oh, great, like another security guy. They kind of roll their eyes at you. I don't know how familiar people are with that world, but it's saturated. But the thing that's crazy to me is you go to a security conference and people want to learn about security, so it's like, yeah, go there, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I have an interest in it, but I also don't have enough time to be super knowledgeable. So like, I always enjoy like chatting with you and seeing your posts and all of that, because I feel like it's a wealth of knowledge for me.
Yeah, there's very much a different like social grouping. Like there's people in security and there's people in software. And I thought that when I first started with security, I assumed it was like the same. Like you'd walk up to like a guy who knows how to hack iPhones at a conference where he did some crazy exploit, and you'd be like, hey, like, how do I secure my Rails app or my Elixir app? He has no idea, because it's not what he works on. It's just a completely different world. And learning that was like actually probably the most useful thing I ever learned in my career, because I'm like, okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, very compartmentalized, right? You kind of know what you know, and that's about
it. But you don't, I don't know, you don't learn this stuff in a book necessarily. I think there's a lot of like, you kind of have to get out there and talk to people. And it's sad because I actually really like learning from books. I like reading and kind of going through exercises and stuff.
Me too.
And a really bitter pill to swallow was that the stuff you need to know is not always in there. You have to kind of get your hands. There's actually a great, I might be misattributing this, but I think it was Hamming, the guy who worked at Bell Labs. He wrote a book called You and Your Research, which I believe Stripe Press published. And he talks about researchers at Bell Labs, where, the research, you had to work with your door open because you tended to get more ideas. He said there were people that just went to the library all day and they knew everything that was written down about a topic, but he said they very rarely made good progress in their research because they weren't kind of engaging in the same way somebody that had to go out and talk to people and experiment was. Great author, great book, but I've found that applicable. I think that's why so many software people love that book, and Stripe republished it.
Well, that makes sense because look how many times you like roadblock yourself because you're too close to a problem. Yeah. And the second you describe your problem to another developer or friend, you usually solve the problem before you even get an answer from them.
Exactly.
Just the reframing and hearing yourself discuss your problem, you normally solve a problem.
I know we kind of like to sit in our bunkers all day and like just be at the keyboard. But yeah, getting out and talking to people is really, and it's nice now that I think remote work has become much more mainstream. We can do a podcast like this. Yeah. Developers didn't really do stuff like this.
I mean, I would never talk to people if I didn't start a podcast. Like, how ridiculous is that? So now
it's great too. Yeah.
I just get to invite people that are doing cool things on, and I get to have a conversation with them. So it's awesome.
Yeah, it's really nice. But yeah, man, it was great talking today. You think that's a good place to call this episode?
Yeah, I mean, we could. Actually, I know a good way to end this.
Okay, please.
If you were to like suggest best practices for Elixir developers for like securing their applications, whether like just good takeaways, resources to kind of stay on top of things.
Yes.
And like, feel free to plug Paraxial, obviously.
But we haven't at all of this episode.
But what are just like things that, we should, as Elixir developers, have ingrained as we take a project, live?
Yeah, that's a good question. You definitely should be using Paraxial, especially with the free tier now, and subscribing to the Paraxial blog, because that's where I publish a lot of material on Elixir security. The other really important resource is Potion Shop, which I believe you've covered actually. That's the open source Elixir app that has a lot of vulnerabilities. I use it a lot in Paraxial demos too. It's nice because you can kind of see the vulnerabilities. These are all Elixir specific, by the way, I should mention. The other one is the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation, the security working group. They publish some guidance on Elixir, secure coding in Erlang and Elixir. So that's really relevant. The thing is, everything I just talked about is very Elixir specific. There is also like a wider body of web security knowledge. So the other company that I really like that I'll mention is Portswigger. The founder of it is the author of this book called The Web Application Hacker's Handbook. The second edition, it was published like a decade ago, but it's still the best resource if you want to learn web security. They're not going to publish a third one though. They just have these labs online. It's like the Web Security Academy. None of the labs are in Elixir, but for learning, if you're like, I want to like grind web security, like I really want to learn this stuff, I want to get it. Those labs are great. I highly recommend them because those will teach you like what the vulnerability is. And then, with Praxis, it'll be like, how do you prevent it in your own work? So the Elixir app you're shipping is secure.
Awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming on. It's always so much awesome information when we chat. And
Thank you. This was fantastic. I appreciate
it. And it's awesome because, having you back on and seeing that you were my first guest, I think I've ironed out quite a few things since we first did this too.
Yeah, you've got some major names on the podcast. You had Jose on. It's been
wild, right?
Very taken up. That's fantastic, man.
I know. I was very nervous for that one.
You were nervous for that one.
I was like,
he's a great guy. He's awesome.
Oh yeah,
he's like so chill.
He's so awesome. Probably one of the nicest people I've ever met too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been fun. Thank you everyone that tuned in, and I'll see you guys in the next live stream. Testing.